Hey folks, if you're joining on Twitter, or on YouTube, on LinkedIn, hello, Justin with Effective Remote Work. We're going to do a couple things differently today in the live stream. First, I want to spend a little bit of time diving into the new live preview mode in Obsidian. And then I want to spend a little bit of time just going through some notes and doing some thinking, some progressive summarization and things like that. If you're just joining in, be sure to say hi in the chat. Let me know where you're signing in from. I'm running a new platform right now for streaming called Restream. And so whether you're on Twitter or LinkedIn or YouTube, the chat will be broadcast both places. It'll also be put right here on the live stream as well, so you can see it as it comes in. So wherever you're at, let me know where you're coming in and we'll get started with the stream in just a few minutes. It's been good to be back and doing some live stream again here on YouTube. I'm also going to be producing some videos. Some of these videos will come out of these live stream times, but they'll also be part of just kind of what we're doing here. I want to spend a little bit more time doing lives because I find them to be lots of fun. I've invested some time into some resources into upgrading the live stream setup that I have here in my home office. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to testing it out today and using it. If you have any questions about it, pop them in the chat. Again, if you're tuning in, do say where you are in the world in the chat. I'd love to hear from you. We're going to dive into Obsidian's live preview mode today. That's for insiders right now, and we'll be rolling out to the application in the future. And then we're going to just do some work with me time, think with me time, spend a little time just digging into some notes. If you have something that you want to work with me on while you're just kind of hanging out with me here on the live stream, let's do that. Go ahead and grab a project or something you want to think through, and we can work with it while we're here on the live stream together. If you're not familiar with Effective Remote Work, we're a resource for remote workers, aiming to help remote workers do the best that they can with their jobs, but also to build the life that they want to live. We get a lot of options and flexibility a lot of times in remote work, and some of those choices can be daunting at times, and navigating a remote work world can be a difficult thing in certain circumstances, especially if you're brand new to it. And so our aim here is to provide resources to you to be able to give you the best chance at being successful in a remote work world. We also cover a lot on note-taking and productivity applications. A lot of the videos on the channel right now are currently geared toward Obsidian, which is my favorite note-taking application. And if you're a knowledge worker in any capacity, I highly recommend taking notes, writing down things that you're learning, capturing thoughts that you have, transforming them into something that is beneficial for you down the road. Note-taking isn't necessarily about trying to figure out an idea or to learn something or just to make it through a course, but it's really one of the ways that as we grow and get out of school, one of the ways that we learn as adults is to take notes, to process our own thoughts out, to read books, to watch videos like this one, take notes on what I'm learning, and then to try to process them into something that can maybe help me down the road. We're going to get started with the live stream here in just a moment. But again, if you're watching this for the first time, welcome. If you're a return viewer here on the channel, welcome back. Thanks for watching. And be sure to let me know in the chat where you're coming from. I'd love to hear from you. We'll get into Obsidian's live preview in just a moment. All right, we're live here at Effective Remote Work. Thanks so much for joining today's live stream. One of the things that I wanted to talk through today is Obsidian's brand new live preview mode, We'll hop over into Obsidian in just a second. But the thing that I wanted to talk about first in regards to this is, if you used Obsidian in its early stages, you realize that there was this preview mode, and then there was the editing mode. In editing mode, you saw all the markdown formatting, all the curly brackets and square brackets and wiki links and that. If you go to preview mode, then you just see this nice, clean page that looks a lot like a web page that you go to and browse around and click through. One of the things that people had been asking the Obsidian developers the most for over the course of time was to have some sort of what you see is what you get editor. So when you type in the editor and say you bold something, that it looks bold instead of having asterisks around it. Well, now on the insiders track of the Obsidian application, there is a new live preview test. Let's hop over into the application so we can take a look at what this live preview looks like and how you might be able to use it for your benefit. All right, so on the screen here, I'll increase my font size so you can see a little bit better. We have the new live preview. This is just a note that I've taken out of my Obsidian vault so that you can see what this looks like. On the face, it looks just like you would if I had put it into preview mode. In fact, I'll do that here real quick. This is preview mode, and you can hover over links and see the note the card for the note that's there. You can see the different links. You can click on those links. You can see the tags and so on and so forth. If I hop back over to the live preview editing mode, you can see it looks relatively the same. But say if I were to click on this horizontal rule here, you can see that it turns into the markdown syntax that we're used to seeing in a normal editor preview. What's nice about this is that it just kind of gives you a simple, easy way to engage with your notes, but not get lost in all of the formatting. So if at the bottom here, I was just going to add a couple headings. Add another one. You can see that as I click off of them, the pound signs go away and I'm just left with the heading. But if I click back on them, I get them back. It just hides all the extra visual stuff. And so especially when you're getting into links and things that can get a little bit more ugly inside of the application, you start being able to engage with your note in a more holistic way. So if I look up here at this link, just click on it, you can see I've got the wiki links around it. Now, if I wanted to create a web link, so let's say discourse. You can see I've got the standard markdown formatting here on this link, but if I click off of it, then we have a regular web link. If you've got a long, ugly URL, it's really nice to not see that when you're editing your notes right in the editor. You don't have to flip back and forth between edit and preview mode to get a nice view. You don't have to have two panes stacked to the side like we used to with Obsidian. Now you can have it all in one editing mode, and then you don't really have to worry about it anymore. If you're on the insiders track, to turn this on, you have to head into settings. You'll get a pop-up when you first open up Obsidian 2 asking if you want to enable this. So you have to uncheck this setting, use legacy editor. This is on by default. It requires a relaunch to turn that legacy editor off or on. So I have it off right now because we want to use live preview. So I can do live preview or source mode for default editing. If we go back to source mode, let's just remind ourselves what this looks like. This is source mode. This is what live preview is going to supersede at some point in the future. I think it's a really good thing. It really makes Obsidian feel like a modern note-taking application all the more. So we'll go back to live preview, and then the default new pane view, that doesn't really change here. It's either the editing view, which is the live preview, or the source mode, and then reading view, which is the view that we had when we switch over to this. Reading view is still useful in this context because you can hover over your links and see the previews of those notes, which you don't get when you're in the live preview edit mode. You just get a change of cursor over the text to know that you can click into it. So there's still some utility in going through reading mode, but when it comes down to it, I think Live Preview is going to be a really excellent way to just overall interact with your vault. You still can control click on a note to open it up. You can control shift click on a note to open it up to the side. We still have all that capability here, but overall, when you're interacting with your note, you don't have all of the extra noise. So with that, are you an insider? Are you using Obsidian as Live Preview? Are you figuring out if this is going to work for you or not? Are you finding anything that's not working with it? I'd love to hear from you in the comments, in the chat on this live stream. Let me know what your thoughts are while we're here. In just a moment, we're going to get going on the Think With Me session. If you've got a project that you're working on or a book that you want to look through some notes on, why don't you go ahead and grab that. We'll dive into something in just a second. If you have any questions too about Obsidian or my Obsidian Vault, my note-taking practices or anything like that, feel free to put them in the chat today as well. We'll take a quick moment here. I'm going to check on the chat, make sure everything's working okay on my end, and we will get rolling. Just relaunching my chat window here and make sure it's all good. All right, cool. Awesome. So I'm going to get into Obsidian here to just work through some notes. And if you are interested in joining along with me, let me know. Let me know what you're working on in the chat today. I'm going to pull up some notes and I'm just going to start doing some progressive summarization of some articles and books that I've read, and so on. One interesting thing that I've done in my Obsidian Vault recently is I've started the use of an inbox tag. I was first introduced to this via Francesco D'Alessio's walkthrough. I can't remember the guy's name at the moment in time. It was just recent on his Keep Productive YouTube channel where he was going through his system. And he's using an inbox tag to mark notes that he wants to come back to. I currently use Readwise to gather highlights and things about books. And so that's generally what I'm doing to capture my highlights at this moment in time. I used to be just writing notes directly in Obsidian. But now since I'm automating it using Readwise, and I'm also a part of their beta reader application, and so I'm using that for highlighting articles and things of that sort too. This automatically funnels all of these highlights into my inbox tag now using the templating system that they have. It's pretty handy. So I'm going to just pick something here that I haven't gone through yet. Let's see here. How to humanize async work. This is from Doist. I think there's some interesting things in this article that I want to summarize. So the conversation around remote work is quickly shifting from how to make this work right now to how do we optimize remote work for the long term. I think that's pretty true at this moment in time. This has been my #1 challenge with remote work at this moment, has been building relationships with colleagues at a distance. Especially when you're working in an asynchronous remote environment, it's really, really easy to just not engage with people and just kind of, I guess, function really, what's the word? It's really easy to function transactionally. That's the word that I'm looking for. So instead of building relationships with people, it becomes, hey, can I get this from you? Hey, can I have permission to do this thing? Hey, can I have some money to go buy this tool? Hey, can you check my work? Instead of really building a relationship. A lot of that relationship stuff that happens in a remote work or in an office context, it can tend to happen like tangentially to being there to work, but because we're people and we work in the same place, it naturally happens. But anytime you're in a remote context, things have to be more intentional. And so like building relationships, building camaraderie, cultivating culture has to be like 10x or even 100x more intentional in a remote environment like that. That's something that I've noticed, something that I have seen in my own experience. Let's see if I have any notes. Yeah, communication must be intentional in a remote work world. That is definitely true there. We'll open that up to the side. Let's see. Oh, yeah. So, and if you haven't read any of Seth Godin's work, he's got this book about, I can't remember the exact title of it, but it's about an idea virus. It's basically, how do you create ideas that spread? And if you think about it, culture is essentially an idea virus in a way. It's an idea or a way that we do things that people latch onto and spread amongst themselves. It's kind of like a standard that we adhere to in a sense. But ideas like that in an online environment don't spread as naturally. They have to be more intentionally invested into. I think that's a good start on that one. I think this graphic is a really good point because it's really easy. I think when you're in a remote context, it's really easy to overlook the fact that culture in a company is so much more than just how you socialize. It's really easy to just kind of get pigeonholed into thinking like, oh yeah, people are talking, that's culture, or people aren't talking, we don't have any culture in our company. But a lot of it is how you actually get work done. So the company that I work for, Discourse, we're a fully async remote company, and that is a huge part of our team culture. And so, and with socializing being a small piece of that. So I think that's a really interesting and fair point, that team culture is really a percentage how you socialize, but it's majority how you work together. Let's see here. Building cohesive team culture, creating camaraderie, fostering. How do you recreate the social interaction you get in an office? Yeah, I think this is an interesting point here too. We often, instead of reframing how we think about work in a remote context, we often try to apply the mindsets that we have towards traditional work in an office to a remote work setting. This is kind of something that I'm going through a little bit right now myself, because I'm wondering, where being social and building relational connections with a remote asynchronous team fits in, especially in the pandemic era. Traditionally, I know Discourse would have an annual meetup somewhere in the world. And now I'm just wondering, like, since we haven't had one for 2.5 years now, what does it look like to build social connections? Do you try to do fun stuff together, like playing a video game? Or do you just kind of leave it and try to focus on your local connections? I think there's a balance to be found in this, because I think with remote work, we have to have trust with our teammates, because that's what builds a cohesive, healthy company. Simon Sinek's book, Leaders Eat Last, goes really, really deep into this subject. And so if you're wanting to learn more about trust, definitely check out that. It's a great resource on that and why it's important for companies to focus on building trust. But in a remote context, how much do you need to invest in that? There's just not as many opportunities to socialize with people. And as a result, that can be problematic. It can be kind of challenging. It can be actually really disorienting for someone coming in who is used to socializing with people at the office, and then you don't really get an opportunity outside of that fact. Let's see here. Highlight this. Hi, Rahul. Thanks for joining the stream. I'm doing pretty well today. How about yourself? Let's see here. How do you recreate the social interactions you get in an office? And to restate this, it would be people, instead of thinking differently about the mode of work, we tend to impose our existing mindsets and expectations of work on remote work. Hey, I'm really glad that the videos have helped set up a workflow. That really makes me happy to hear that. That's the whole point. That's why I do what I do here, is because I want to help folks like you figure stuff out and build something that's helpful for yourself. So I'm really glad to hear that. Thanks for sharing. Are you working on something, Rahul? Hey, the Avocado Protocol. Welcome. I'm doing pretty well today. For anybody else that's just joining too, a little earlier in the stream, I took a little bit of a preview into the live preview mode inside of Obsidian, the WYSIWYG editor that's been on the roadmap for a while. Well, glad to hear that. Thanks for the feedback. I'm glad the videos are helpful. So what we're doing right now is just kind of what I call a Think With Me session. I might make this into a Think With Me Thursday, where we spend 45 minutes or so on a live stream, just kind of working through something in Obsidian. If you have questions, feel free to ask them. If you have something that you want to work on during this time, do that as well. And I want to invest a little bit more in the live aspects of YouTube. I've got this running on Twitter and LinkedIn as well. So if you're joining from either of those, welcome. Thanks for listening. Thanks for joining. I don't know if there's chat on Twitter or on YouTube at this point in time. There might be on one of them, but I'm not entirely certain if they're functional with Restream, the provider that I'm using to multi-stream here. But if you are able to chat on one of those platforms, do say hi. Otherwise, we do have a stream going over on YouTube if you want to join in on the chat aspect of things too. All right, looking a little further here. Team culture, human connection is primarily built on how you work together, not how you socialize together. I think that's fair. I'm going to tie this to Leaders Eat Last, just because this book by Simon Sinek is essential, I think, for this concept. We have to figure out how to build trust in a remote environment. And if we're just working in siloed pieces and places in a remote environment, it's hard to build that kind of trust and relationship when you're working fully asynchronously. Treat social activities as part of the workday, not extracurricular. I think that is very true in a remote context, because you have to be all the more intentional about it. And because there are maybe a handful of opportunities to be social in a remote work environment, and because you have to be so intentional with it all, having it as part of the workday where you can take 45 minutes to an hour to just hang out and do something, to talk with people, I think that's a really positive thing. Got plenty of work to do. I think this is an important point here as well. If we're forced to choose between core work or a social activity, many of us will focus on our obligations. Yep, that's very true. Rahul, you're trying to figure out how to use tags. Me too. I use them very, very sparingly in my Obsidian vault. I tend to think of them as like kind of things. So if we look here, I tend to organize them just by the kind of things that's in my vault. So I've got literature notes and then split those out between the different kinds of them: books, articles, videos, and then different kinds of notes. I've labeled these down. So project notes, meeting notes, things of that sort. That's kind of a mess right now, though I haven't really done too much with that. Inbox, a to-do tag with some that I want to come back to, and other things as well. So that's kind of my view on tags, is I try to use them really limitedly, and then I focus more heavily on linking notes together. So if there's a subject area that I want to tie together to specific topics, I'll use a note for that or a wiki link for that instead of a tag, just because in the way my mind works, it works better. I know that's not the case for everybody. And the Avocado Protocol, you're mentioning that you started with the digital note-taking world, so you're trying to find a workflow that suits you more. Well, I think that's a very noble approach. Note-taking is something that I think is very important for anyone who's working in any sort of a field with information to do. It's our way of being able to synthesize and contextualize information. If I could just give one piece of advice, it's just start with something that makes sense to you right now. You can always reorganize it later. That's the beauty of Obsidian. I think I've gone through probably 5 or 6 different ways I've organized notes in my vault in the last 2 years alone, since I started using Obsidian, really. And with that, I think that we have lots of abilities to move stuff around. So all of my notes are still there. I still have access to them. I mean, if you look at my knowledge graph, they're still all largely linked together, even though I've done a million different things in this vault over time. But the cool thing is with that is that I can try new things and they're still connected in there. I can still find them. And it's kind of, I've learned some principles along the way that have helped me out. But if you just start small, start linking things together, and then build from there. Maybe if you're running into some friction points where like, I can't find that anymore, or this isn't really working out for me, then you can take a step back and try to evaluate, do I need to do something different? But the more you take notes, the more an organizational structure that makes sense to you will start to emerge. So just take notes until you start feeling some pain or you get frustrated or you're feeling friction with something. And then back up and say, okay, how do I solve that problem? And then keep taking notes, and then so on and so forth. Just repeat that process back and forth. There really is no one size fits all note-taking workflow in my mind. Same thing with anything to do with productivity or task management, goal setting, or anything like that. Anybody who says that there's one way to do it, I definitely wouldn't believe them, because we're all different people. We process information differently. We handle information differently. You might find that a specific tool or methodology works better for you than others. Like, for example, in the productivity sense of things, so many people are like, time blocking. It's the best way to do things. But when it comes down to it, for me, every time I tried to block time, I flat out do sorry, I totally lost my train of thought there. But every single time I try to block time, I get super stressed out. I just wrote an article over on effectiveremotework.com kind of about this, but I've started experimenting with the Pomodoro technique, which is interesting because it's similar but different to time blocking. It's just the mode of thinking when I approach using a timer versus putting a plan for my day together. It's so much less stressful. It helps me move forward instead of trying to keep up with this plan that I've set for myself. Omar, you're asking, how do I do task management? That's a really good question. I can't show it on stream right now because I have some sensitive things in there, but I'm using Todoist at this moment in time. And to basically break it down is I've got 2 different sections in it. I've got a project section, which is anything that's associated with an end goal. And so I put buckets together for those tasks. And then below that I have a roles section, which is anything associated with like a standard or anything that has a recurring work associated with it, or really any area that I want to just keep pushing forward at some point in time in my life. So there's a big long list of both of those. And if you've seen the para methodology from Tiago Forte, it's similar to that. I've kind of ripped a couple ideas from that. I haven't really thought the para methodology is one that works well for me altogether, but that methodology of splitting up projects and roles actually really made a lot of mental sense to me, and so that's why I'm using that in there. But basically, I just have some routines that I do on a regular basis. I used to be so much more intense about my project management and task management, and I've realized over time that it just can't be intense. So, like, if I were to summarize in a couple of sentences and points, like what my task management looks like is organize the work that makes sense to organize, capture everything that you can and loosely plan. Like, just have an idea of what you might want to work on in a day or an area that you want to work on, and just go. For me, I tend to plot a little bit more than plan. I like to kind of go focus on one thing and then pick the next thing and then pick the next thing, versus I'm going to work on these things and then next week I'm going to do this, and then the week after that I need to do this. That doesn't really work for me very well. Rahul is asking, how do you collect information from browser and YouTube videos? Convert them to Markdown syntax. There's some software you can suggest? Yes. And that is actually Readwise. And I will post a link in the chat. Here, I'm going to just go over to my camera here for a second. I'll pull up the link. But if you're interested in checking out Readwise, let's see here. I've got an affiliate link if you're interested in supporting what we do here, if you sign up. If not, it's totally okay. There's no pressure, but I'll add it in the chat if you are interested. Let's see here. All right, so I just added it to the chat. I highly recommend using Readwise. They've got an Obsidian Sync plugin that is just fantastic. In fact, this is how I pulled this article in here. They have in a closed beta right now a reader view where you can click a button in your web browser, save an article into Readwise Reader, and then do all your highlighting in there. That is a killer feature, and I think if you're interested in having that at some point, definitely recommend signing up now. It's getting to be pretty mature, but I have no idea when they're going to release it. But when they do, or getting closer to it, I do plan on doing a video or two about it so that we can figure that out, so you guys can figure out what that looks like. Avocado Protocol saying that's true. I've started thinking simple. Yeah, it's so easy to overcomplicate this stuff. Like, seriously. I think I probably worked for 10 years with productivity stuff. And was frankly just overthinking everything. I was making things way too complicated. Had these grand ideas of a system and how it would work and how I could build it, and then built it and shared it and used it for 3 weeks, and then it completely fell on its face and never worked again. And so over time, I've just really backed off and just tried working with what's working for me, and then from there just trying to do the best that I can. So Omar is asking about Todoist. Does the Todoist sync to your Obsidian 2 and integrate into your larger Obsidian flow, or is that separate? At this time, it is 100% separate. I use Todoist solely for projects and task management. I keep myself on top of the action items that I need to take care of. In rare occasions, I'm putting some notes about those projects into Obsidian, but in theory, or in actuality, I haven't actually done that much. I have a whole setup in here with some Kanban boards where I could do that, but practically speaking, I haven't actually been doing that. Obsidian has largely been my storage repository for thoughts and things that I wanted to capture for a later moment in time, ideas, a place where I can build a Zettelkasten in a sense, though it's my own form of Zettelkasten, not really the Zettelkasten method in particular. It's just a place where I have notes that I'm splitting off bigger ideas into smaller ideas, and smaller ideas are getting connected to other smaller ideas, and then just trying to figure it out as I go. I don't really have an aim or a goal with a lot of this, but I know doing some of these Think With Me Thursdays in the future, I aim to process through more of my notes and consolidate some of these ideas a little bit more as well too. I do fully agree with this. Yeah. I don't know if any of you are working in a remote organization right now, but so much of this stuff is critical for us to think about, but it's really hard to do, especially when you have momentum. It's like you're working against momentum to do so, to try to foster human connections in an online context. That's actually part of the reason why I'm doing these live streams, because I really like talking with you guys in the midst of doing a little bit of work. I think it's really fun. Yan is asking, is there a user-friendly tool that you recommend for diagrams or flowcharts? Something that you can do on the fly during a remote meeting. Diagrams, flowcharts. Let's see. I mean, honestly, probably the easiest thing that I can think of is just paper. I know it's probably not the answer that you're looking for, but it's probably the easiest, most free-form thing that you can use in that context. You could also look at something like an iPad Pro with a Apple Pencil and using a piece of software like Miro or GoodNotes, or even just Apple Notes altogether, to just sketch things out. And then if you want to share that right after the meeting, you can. Or if you need to take that idea and formalize it later on, you can. If you're looking at something collaborative in the midst of a meeting, I've played with Miro a little bit. It's not like super quick, or gives you the ability to just like fast sketch something out, but it does have a lot of tools that you can use to do whiteboarding, putting flow charts or diagrams and things like that together. And then you can also share it. People can have access to it like a Google Doc, where you can see and interact with your Miro board all at the same time. So that's an option for you in that context. I've used it a little bit myself with doing some planning things, and I've actually sat on my little couch over here on my iPad doing some drawing, and then had the big screen of it up here on my desktop in a web browser, just so I could like look down at something, zoom in, write something, and then still see the big picture of it. It was actually a really nice replacement for having a whiteboard. I've got a whiteboard on the other side of the camera over here, but it's kind of in an odd spot for me to go over there and work on it. I've thought about hanging it up somewhere over here, but I haven't gotten to doing that quite yet. And plus, I wasn't sure how my camera setup was going to be here for a while. And a lot of times I have work-related things that I can't share publicly on my whiteboard, and so I wanted to make sure that that was completely separated out and different. Good questions. Thanks for chiming them in the chat. If you're just watching, tuning in, feel free to ask any questions about remote work, productivity, note-taking. Those are all three kind of the areas that I highlight on this YouTube channel. Also, if you're liking this live stream too, if you're enjoying it, please hit the like button. That helps other people find it in the YouTube algorithm. So definitely enjoy. If you do enjoy it, hit the like button if you would, please. Other than that, yeah, okay. So I've processed through this one note here. I've gotten through one note today. That's pretty good. Let's see. Are there any other inbox notes that I want to hit? Here's an old Cal Newport article that I found the other day. Yeah, there's only one highlight out here, but I think it's incredibly important to grab. So at this moment in time, 2012, just about 2013, Newport published this article where he's embracing getting things done for shallow work. And in his definition of shallow work is all the stuff that needs to get managed, the communications, the inboxes, all the little tasks that you need to take care of. Like I have a new printer that I have to set up over there. That's a piece of shallow work. I don't have to think deeply about setting up a new printer on my desk. But there's a different modality and mental frame that is required for deep work. I know he's on his blog really been diving into that deeply in the last couple of years. And I think it's really interesting, but I think what's more interesting is noting this duality between deep and shallow work, because we need both. You can't just be doing deep work all the time. I mean, even Newport himself says that you can't, he says that you can't work probably more than about 4 hours deeply in a given day. But there are other people who would say that your brain doesn't actually tire out, it just needs change. And I would kind of agree with both of them, because like you can push so far into doing deep, thoughtful, quality work, but then your brain needs change. So it's like where you kind of do this dual shift between I'm doing a session of deep work and then I'm doing some shallow work, and I'm doing a session of deep work and I'm doing a session of shallow work. But there's also this rest and disconnection mentality that needs to happen in there too. Like with, let's see, I'm going to link 2 things here, time off and then also hyperfocus. Because Chris Bailey in his book Hyperfocus talks about the duality between hyperfocus, which is putting only one thing in your attentional space and focusing on that deeply, and then shallow focus, or scatter focus is the right word, which is you're letting your mind wander and kind of make all of the connections. And so there are these kind of 4 things, really, probably 3 in some senses, but probably 4 that people need in a cycle to work effectively. Especially in a knowledge work world where we're dealing with lots of information. We need deep work because that's where we get our quality work done. We need shallow work because that's where we get our management tasks done, communicating, getting the report sent out, things of that sort. All the little details of life that often go into shallow work. But then we also need rest time to recharge. We need to disconnect from the work that we're doing, which is partly scatter focus and it's partly just resting. But then I also think that there's a third one, is that we need leisure and fun time. So it's not just time away from work, but it's time where we're intentionally doing things away from work that are purposeful and intentional, but that are just solely for us. We're not producing something for the sake of trying to sell it or grow something or, launch a side project. But like for me, what I'll do, and I hope to do a live stream doing this sometime just for fun. But I love producing music. I've just recently invested in Ableton and the Ableton Push, and I love messing with it. I've got a few different other synthesizers here too. But I think we need all that stuff. So I'm actually, before I forget it, I'm going to write those things down. So 1, we need deep work, shallow work, time off for scatter focus, which allows our brains to process things subconsciously without loading it with new input, and then leisure. Interesting enough here too is that I think this connects with the concepts of range. I think that's, yeah, I've got a lot of notes to work through in that book. But this concept of range from David Epstein. And if you haven't read Range, I definitely recommend checking the book out. It's about how range is about how being a generalist is actually an okay thing in a world where we hyper-focus on specialization. It's good to specialize, and we need specialists, but we also need generalists who can see the big picture of things as well. And so I think these concepts here tie into this idea of range, especially the time for scatter focus and leisure, because these are so focused on output and these are so focused on recharge and creativity. But it's a lot of times when we're engaged in areas outside of our work, that we're actually able to find solutions to problems or to get other ideas. I mean, we talk about, Newton sitting under the apple tree and the apple fell on top of his head is how the myth goes. And he had this great idea for gravity. And so that's kind of like a get out of your normal, do something different that's not related to the thing that you're working on, and you might actually find a problem with that. David Epstein, right? That's his name. Yeah, Epstein goes deeply into that in the book Range. And so there's definitely some connection to these ideas here. Yan says, nice, synth and live are great. What's your synth arsenal? Maybe a topic for another video. Right now it's pretty limited. I don't have a lot of stuff, but what I do have is pretty versatile. I've got the Ableton Push 2 and just a lot of the Ableton stock stuff. I haven't bought any plugins or VSTs for that. Then I have the Electron Digitact, which is a really fun sampler to play with, and then the Teenage Engineering OPZ, which ironically enough was my first synth, and I love the thing, but the build quality on that is not great, and so I'm not very happy with that. It's got a nice bow in the middle of it, which causes retrigs on keys and things like that when they shouldn't be happening. So yeah, not great. For things we need for we'll just call it that. And then copy that over here. Kind of the gist of the idea here anyway. Well, I'm planning to wrap the stream up here in just a couple of short minutes. If anybody has any other questions or thoughts, do be sure to leave them in the chat box here today. Otherwise, if you're catching this after the fact and the video on demand, I would love to hear from you, what you're thinking. Again, be sure to like the video so that other people can find this and other videos on the channel in the YouTube algorithm. And let me know if there are some other topics that you'd love to hear me cover on the channel. Again, we're talking about remote work here, the whole concept of working and living remotely. This can be things about productivity or note-taking, because I think those are huge aspects to being effective in a remote context, but also workplace. But then also, how do you construct a home office? What are some things that you need for a home office? How do you handle having a flexible schedule? Those are things I would love to talk about on the live streams that I have here. Also, I would love to talk about just them in general on our blog and specific YouTube videos as well. So do be sure to leave those either in the chat or in the comments box. I will see those. I'll respond to those. If you leave ideas too, I'll be sure to add them to my list. And I love producing videos and content for questions specifically that you have. I'd also love at some point to do some kind of a question and answer live show in the future. I think that would be pretty fun. Do let me know in the comments if that's something that you would be interested in seeing. Anything ranging from productivity, note-taking to remote work would be fair game for those questions for sure. But again, if you have any other further questions here, we'll be wrapping up in just a moment. Do let me know in the chat. Happy to talk about other things here too. It's funny, looking at my notes here from this Cal Newport article from, again, 2012. How to make my work the foundation of a good life. He mentions that's a bigger question, but I think even that, you know my note here, I think that's even wrong. Because if work is the foundation of our good life, then I think we're missing a lot of aspects of what a good life could be. Instead, I am aiming the question at how do I make work part of a well-rounded, fulfilling life without it overtaking everything? Because that's our tendency when we focus on making work the foundation, is that work becomes the center of everything. And I think that's pretty heavily out of balance and part of the reason why we see so much burnout happening. I gave a conference talk at the CMX Summit this last year about this topic in particular. It was to a group of community managers, but it largely covered this idea of we've got to make this shift away from work being the center of life, or it being work and life. We have to start seeing work as one small piece of the broader picture of life altogether. I think that's something really important for all of us to remember. If you look at Zig Ziglar's Wheel of Life, I think it gives a much more balanced picture of what a balanced, fulfilled life, well-rounded life can look like. Because there's other aspects. I mean, we've got our family and relationships, we have finances, spiritual health, mental, emotional, and physical health. We have our career, we have personal development. There's so many different areas of life that require our focus versus just getting work done. So putting work so far forward, I think, has put us in the wrong spot. I don't think it's as far to say as like the folks do in the book Time Off, where we've got to start really heavily emphasizing leisure. I don't think that's necessarily true, but I think we need to start seeing work more in its place versus it being so forward on things. Well, I'm going to call the stream a wrap for today. Thanks so much for joining me on the stream. I do hope to do more of these in the future. In fact, I'm trying to really sort out a schedule for what this looks like. Again, this was a Think With Me Thursday. I hope to do these more in the future like this. Again, if you enjoyed this stream, do give us a thumbs up, a like on YouTube, retweet this. If you are on Twitter, share this. If you are finding us on LinkedIn, would love to see you more on here and to do more of these. Let me know where. I also have the ability to stream this to other platforms too. If like something having these on like Twitch would be helpful, I'm not quite sure. Or on other platforms like Facebook as well too. We can broadcast to a lot of different places at this moment in time. The Avocado Protocol, thanks for joining this stream too. I was really glad to have you here, and Raul and Yan. Rahul, sorry if I mispronounced your name. I hate mispronouncing people's names. Let's put it that way. But I apologize if I did there. But anyway, have a great rest of your day. Enjoy the weather wherever you're at. Where I'm at, it's really cold out right now, so I won't be doing too much of that. But have a nice rest of your day.